Dana Spalding Trance Channel here today. As you have seen from a couple of previous videos, this is my 10th anniversary of channeling. I actually started to channel, or first contact was made June 21st, 2012. So the summer solstice in 2012, an auspicious day for me. That's when Ananda first made contact with me energetically. But I want to tell you a little bit about my Course in Miracles journey before that. Of course, I started to channel because of the Course in Miracles practice I had. And I know that many of you are, you may look at what I do and think, oh, that's cool, I'd love to do that. Well, you can do that. And our 10th anniversary event, which is coming up, has 8 different channelers who have started channeling as a result of A Course in Miracles and or my work with Jesus and Ananda. So this is something that's totally within your abilities, but you have to have a clarification process first. And that is what the Course in Miracles really is. It's a clarification process. So just as you might go through a cleanse if you're trying to improve your diet, to kind of get rid of all of the junk that you've eaten over the years, a Course in Miracles really is that too. It is a way of getting rid of all the junk in your mind. And this is a big problem these days. We are being driven mad by the junk in our minds as this ascension process continues. And as our minds are being manipulated by the powers that be through mass media systems, those of us that have trained our minds are not being manipulated in the same way. And we are not being, we will say, led down the garden path in the same way. Because we have trained our minds, we know how mind training works. And so if you feel as if you aren't really in control of the decisions you make, or you feel that you've made some decisions recently that are not in your best interest, even though you made those decisions, it may be that your mind was hacked by mainstream media and you have beliefs and value systems residing within your mind that are not serving you. This is what A Course in Miracles does. It reveals these things to you and shows you how to become truly free. Well, A Course in Miracles came to me many, many years ago. I would say around 2002. It was a really bad day I had had a big argument with my mum. My sister and I had kind of called her out on the carpet for a couple of things. It was Christmas. I was going up to see my children. I was separated from them. They were living with their father. I was riddled with guilt and pain. And I was going to go up and see them by myself. And I had had this huge argument with my mum. And I asked my sister to go with me. I didn't want to drive the mountain pass by myself. And just was not in a good place. It was a real low point in my life. I felt like a bad mother. I was riddled with guilt and shame, as I said. And so I asked her to come with me. So we drove up this mountain pass. It's called the Coquihalla Highway. It's a horrible 5,000 foot high mountain pass. And we luckily tucked in behind a snowplow and we followed the snowplow the entire way. It's a very, very dangerous road, very difficult to drive, but there we were just, behind the snowplow. And so we made it. At the top of the mountain, there was a town called Kamloops, and we stopped. We were tired from the drive. And my sister went into a Chapters there, or Indigo, whatever you call that. I think it was called Chapters back in the day. And when she got back in the car, she kind of tossed this book my way and said, I don't know why I bought this. Why don't you read it? And it was A Course in Miracles. I had never heard of the book. I didn't know what it was. And I said, well, okay, I guess that's what I said. I can't really remember what I said. But it was interesting that she bought it and gave it to me. That Christmas, I began to read the book. So I was visiting my children in their father's house, which was a little dumpy place, which made me feel even more guilty about the divorce and being separated from my sons. And I started to read this book, and I didn't understand it, as many of you will know. When you first start reading the text, it's very, very difficult and doesn't seem to make any sense, even though the words are comprehensible alone. Together, they are very difficult to understand. And that first night, I had a dream. I had a dream about this little creature floating in space. He was like a little potato-looking guy with arms and legs, and he was very lonely and very sad and cold in the dark of space. And in the dream, he asked himself, I wonder why I have hands and arms if there's nothing to do with them up in space. And so he thought, well, I'm going to reach out my arms and I'm going to see what happens. And so he reached out his arms in the dream, and on both sides of his hands touched other creatures just like him. And in the dream, there was a circle of all these creatures. As they all reached their hands out and touched each other, a light was formed, and one by one in a circle, it turned out these creatures weren't alone. And when they reached out when they extended their hand, light was created, and they realized that there was a whole bunch of them who had been floating alone in the darkness. Now, if that isn't a Course in Miracles dream, I don't know what is. Of course, at the time, I didn't know what A Course in Miracles was. This was like the first night I had ever read the book. And I noticed some other things happening. I had physical sensations in my head, almost like things were being reworked. And I also had this feeling to connect with people. So I made a phone call to a friend of mine, a guy that I had just met. It wasn't a romantic thing, but I called him, and I remember thinking, oh, this isn't like me to reach out and call someone. Again, extending myself to somebody else to connect. And this is really the fundamental principle of A Course in Miracles is extension is love expressing itself through you. Projection is us projecting out what we don't want of ourselves and placing it on other people, blaming other people. So this is one of the reasons why judgment is such a huge aspect of A Course in Miracles. Because when you're judging, you're projecting. It means you are putting something from within your mind onto somebody else in an effort to get some peace. What the Course teaches is the ability to come to peace through the relinquishment of judgment. And in the relinquishment of judgment, you find peace. And in that peace, spiritual connection can be made. And so that was what happened to me. For the first 4 years I did A Course in Miracles, I did not read anything else. I became completely obsessed with A Course in Miracles. Obviously, I understand now that part of my life's purpose was to teach this material. And so I became a lot more obsessed than some people. But in those first few weeks of reading this book, still not understanding it, I had some experiences that were very pivotal in my continuing on. So one afternoon, I was doing my Course in Miracles lesson. I was actually laying on the bed and I was praying. I said, I love you and I trust you. And I was speaking to God. I didn't know Jesus was the teacher in Course in Miracles at that point. I was speaking to God, and I said, I love you and I trust you. And I just kept saying over and over again, I love you and I trust you. I had my eyes closed. And I had my first out-of-body experience. I was completely awake. I wasn't asleep. And my consciousness hurtled out of my body vertically. I could even feel going through clouds, which seems very strange, but that's what it felt like. And when I got where I was going, which maybe took me a few seconds, I was in space and I was surrounded by a spiral galaxy full of information. It was shapes and letters and numbers and pyramids and tetrahedrons and math numbers. It was all kinds of, symbols and signs. And I understood that the universe was made of information. And that was the only experience I had on that first one. And then I plummeted back and suddenly I was back in my body. I knew it was an out-of-body experience. I'd had a lot of experience reading about these things, but I'd never experienced it before. This was about 3 weeks into doing A Course in Miracles. So the next day, of course, as we do, I was striving to have the experience again. So I did exactly the same thing. And lo and behold, the same thing happened. Now, normally when you strive after these kinds of spiritual experiences, they don't happen again, and they may never happen again in your lifetime. But in this one particular instance, it happened again. My consciousness hurtled out of my body again, and I was back up in the spiral galaxy. But this time there was a stairway, and at the top of the stairway was an illuminated door that was open, and in that doorway was a silhouetted figure. And I heard this voice say, "Tell Dave he's overwhelmed and confused." I didn't really know, okay, what that meant. I remember coming back into my body. This time I remember jumping up and down on the bed. I was so excited that this was happening. I guess I was probably thinking it was going to happen every day. It never happened again after those two events. But I did tell that person, I knew somebody called Dave. I didn't tell him I'd had an out-of-body experience. I told him I'd had a dream, to tell him he was overwhelmed and confused. And he said, yes, I am overwhelmed and confused. That didn't seem like a very, very big deal at the time. I said, well, I guess someone wants you to know that someone knows, spirit knows, or something like that. And it was not a big deal, the conversation. But it turned out that that person ended up being one of my very, very big forgiveness practices about 3 or 4 years later. So there was a very significant interaction with that person later on, which I won't go into details about. But so that was kind of my introduction to the course. And I also ended up connecting with a young woman who was having a really hard time emotionally. And she ended up coming on a daily basis to my art gallery. I had a little studio where I was doing art, and she was really struggling with things emotionally, very emotional, crying all the time, couldn't cope with very much at all. She just joined AA, as I was in AA at the time. I just quit drinking, so that was something to do with the course coming to me. I'd quit drinking about a year before. Anyway, this young woman and I decided to become roommates, and we did the Course in Miracles lessons together. And so we had a year living together, doing these lessons. She was living her life, I was living mine. And it was very interesting coming back each day or a few times a week together to talk about what we'd been experiencing. And what I saw was that even though she and I were extremely different, we would be experiencing the same issue, but in different forms. So it was very interesting. Her insecurities would lead her to behave in a particular way. My insecurities would lead me to behave in a completely different way. So the form was different, but the underlying root cause was the same. And these were the kinds of things that the Course started to reveal to us, that the form can be different, but the root problem is the same. So that was about the first year of A Course in Miracles. I didn't really have any other extreme out-of-body experiences in that first year. I did have some other extreme spiritual experiences, though, throughout the 12 years that I studied the Course before I started channeling. I'll tell you one other one just to give you an idea. Now, this would have been 5 or 6 years after this. I had gone on a trip to Mexico with a male friend of mine. It had not gone well. We'd ended up having a big fight, and I had decided to come back to the island that I live on the west coast of Canada. Anyway, I ended up in this house. I didn't have any money because I'd done this big trip to Mexico. I was homeless and jobless, and I went to the market one day, and this woman said, I just met her randomly, and she said, oh, there's a room in our boarding house that you can rent if you want to. So I decided I didn't really have a choice. I didn't want to roommate with this person I'd gone on the trip with anymore. And so I joined this house. Anyway, it was a house of crazy women. At the time, I didn't realize that I was one of the crazy women, but I was one of the crazy women. There was a very overweight lady who just ate and ate and ate all the time. There was the lady who had offered me the room, who was into New Age material, but she was chanting and doing all kinds of things all day long, believing that she was transforming the world, which is really interesting because at the time I was pretty dismissive about that, but in hindsight, maybe she was. And then the other lady was heartbroken and depressed and laid on the couch all day. And then there was me, who was homeless and jobless. And it was a very difficult time because I've been doing the course for 5 years at this point. But what I saw in the first few years was that all of my mind distortions were playing out, and the course was helping me understand how I was leading myself into a chaotic life. Anyway, I had one dark night of the soul at this place where I felt as if I was a complete failure. I was in my late 40s. I was nothing was going right. Even though I'd been doing the course for a while, this particular day, all of my failures kind of hit me hard. And I was crying and praying. I was crying and I was praying to have my perception healed, to have my mind healed. I've been doing the course for a while at this point. And I always say I was kind of in the remedial class. I was a very slow learner. And I think I had taken myself into such depths of the ego that it took me a few years for the course to really work its magic on me. Anyway, I got into a real emotional state, I wouldn't say I was suicidal, but sort of the level up from suicidal. Really bad night, crying, praying. And I laid on my bed, just exhausted. I'd been crying and praying all night, all evening, I should say. And I had my eyes closed, and suddenly my consciousness was lifted out of my body. And I say I was held in the arms of God. I was held in this expansive, all-loving, all-knowing, all-forgiving energy. Very, very hard to describe. A feeling of oneness, a feeling of absolute, overwhelming love. But I was not in my body. I was sensing that I had my eyes closed, but I was sensing that my astral form had been lifted out of my body. And I just rested in the arms of this energy because I was so very tired and I was so very exhausted. And after about half an hour, it lasted a long time, I said, I'm really tired. You have to put me down now. And I was put back into my body and I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up truly understanding what the Course meant when it talked about the love of God. I'd never experienced anything like that feeling in my life. I honestly haven't since that time. I believe it was a gift to show me what the Course was talking about, what real love is, and how we are truly loved. And I got up the next morning and I said, I will accept anything or anyone you bring to me. And I really became humbled to that place where I believe that I 100% then from that day on believed A Course in Miracles. I had had this experience of revelation, as it calls it in the Course, where God communicates directly with you. And the next day I was offered a job, a one-day job doing some sewing. I was a seamstress many years ago, and so I got this job doing some sewing for one day. It turned into a job for 2 or 3 years, and that was really the turning point in my Course in Miracles practice. So that was about 6 years into doing A Course in Miracles. My trials and tribulations continued. I had some huge forgiveness practices over the coming years, and maybe I'll tell you about those in another video. But I just wanted to give you a little taste of what my early days of A Course in Miracles were like and how very, very transformative it was. Throughout those 6 years, even though I had these, this dark night of the soul, I was studying A Course the entire time. I had done the lessons. I was practicing. I was beginning to see how Tina's ego was a liability, how it was something that was constantly making her make bad decisions. And that exhaustion and depletion and lack that I felt in that house was because I had been following my ego that year. And that morning, when I woke up, truly surrendered to A Course in Miracles, I swore to myself that from that day forward, it was going to be A Course in Miracles that guided my life. And it was A Course in Miracles from that point. And things really began to change from that point. I still had some trials and tribulations, but each one of them taught me something about my mind, taught me something about how I was off track, taught me about a belief I had that was incorrect. And so over the years, my practice deepened, and in the last 6 months of my Course in Miracles practice, before I started channeling, I did a deep, deep dive into my last big resentment. So I'd been working on all kinds of resentments with family and friends and having some mistakes along the way for sure. Wasn't perfect at it. But in that last 6 months, I decided that I was going to eradicate this one particular resentment from my mind. And I dived deep into forgiveness practice. And on some days, I would have to pray 60, 70, 80 times to stop my mind judging this person or telling a story about this person that was my forgiveness practice focus. And it was, I believe it was that last 6 months that really turned the corner in my frequency and in my Course in Miracles practice that allowed Ananda and Jesus to make contact. It was my forgiveness practice with that one particular very, very divisive, difficult relationship. So I do want to encourage those of you that have been watching these videos for years, if you have a resentment still, make it the focus of your practice for a month or so, where every time that person comes in your head, you tell yourself that they're innocent and so are you. Ask your mind to be healed. Ask your perception to be changed. Knowing that the judgment resides in you. That person, when they show up in your mind, is not the person. It is your vision of the person. So it's your mind being revealed to you when a resentment shows up in your mind. So what I found out about this particular person, and this was found out many, many years later through prayer again, through asking to be shown again what was going on in my mind, what my ego was getting out of this. I discovered that this person showed up in my mind judging me right after I had judged myself. And usually my judgments were around my appearance or my physique. And through prayer, Jesus showed me this. He showed me that this person showed up in my mind judging me right after I'd had a hateful thought about myself. And to this day, if I ever have a judgmental thought about myself, this scapegoat that my ego has manufactured to blame for my negative feelings will show up. And so what I know now is that it's my mind that is the problem. It is not the other person. And so my forgiveness practice continues with this person. And I just want you to know that you can heal everything that is going on in your mind. And I know that many of you are struggling with concerns about the future, concerns about inflation, heating, what's going on the planet with all kinds of different agendas. If you want to find peace, please do start A Course in Miracles. Start it again if you started and couldn't finish it. Read it, or of course you can read my books. They are all related to A Course in Miracles and help you understand some of those principles. I want to thank you for watching this video. I'll stop it here. That's long enough, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of my personal story as it is my 10th anniversary. And this coming Sunday, Sunday, September the 18th, 10 a.m. Pacific, we will be having a celebration channeling event. 8 channelers coming on to share their channeled material to introduce you to their channeled entities and teachers. Please do join us. If you've enjoyed these videos over the years, please do consider joining us. You can go to channelingjesus.com and the registration form is on the home page. So you can just click on the register and it will take you to the registration form. You will get a recording of the full event with your registration. So if you are unable to attend live, you will have the opportunity to watch the full video. That will be part of your registration fee. If you want to buy a recording, we will have a recording available after the fact, but it will only be the audio. It will not be the video. And I think it will be really interesting for you to see all these different faces, to see all of these different movements and speech patterns. Of course, I will be channeling at the beginning and closing the event at the end. So if you'd like to have a channeling feast this Sunday, I'll be loading this up on Thursday. So today is Thursday. You've got a couple of days to register. Registration will close 8 a.m. on Sunday. Please don't wait to the end. There are some questions sometimes that people have, so it really, really helps the person managing the registrations if you register sooner rather than later. Please do consider joining us. Stay here for a moment and you will see a video of the channelers who are going to grace you with their work. And we look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Thank you very much for all the support through all the years. I love reading your comments. I don't necessarily answer them a lot. I trained myself very early on not to get too involved in YouTube comments because I was called some very, very nasty names early on. But I do read them, and I thank you very much for coming back time after time to listen to these wonderful, wonderful teachings. I'm very grateful for the last 10 years. I can't imagine my life without A Course in Miracles, to be perfectly honest. I don't think I'd be alive if I had not found A Course in Miracles at that low point in my life. I was heading not in a good direction. And I think that my family would have become more and more fractured. I have a beautiful relationship with my sons now. I'm in business with both of them. They have both done A Course in Miracles, and at some point you will get to meet them. I will do an interview with them, and they can tell you about their Course in Miracles experience. But for now, that's the end of this video. Perhaps I'll see you on Sunday. Bye-bye.